Just after the funeral of my mother-in-law, whom I loved like a real mother, a letter arrived from her. A lawyer brought the letter to our house. I am Sharon, 43 years old. The letter began, "If this letter has reached you, it means I am no longer in this world. I'm worried you might be crying." Seeing the familiar handwriting of my mother-in-law, my eyes welled up. My father-in-law passed away at a young age, long before my husband and I got married, and there seemed to be no close relatives in his family, with almost zero family interaction. My husband and I were not blessed with children, so we lived modestly but happily with my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law and I got along so well that my husband would say, "You two are like a real mother and daughter, and I'm like the son-in-law." Last year, my husband passed away from cancer, and it was just my mother-in-law and me. Then, she suddenly became a victim of a traffic accident. There were many mysterious points about the accident, and for some reason, my mother-in-law was found collapsed on a road in a city where she should have had no connection, and she was hit by a passing car. The police are investigating both the incident and the accident, but her supposed bag hasn't been found. I was asked various circumstances by the police, but I didn't know much, and I couldn't respond properly due to the shock. I can't sort out my feelings about my sudden parting with my mother-in-law. In my husband's case, we had a year of medical treatment, and my mother-in-law was there, so we could remember him to our heart's content. We promised to overcome our grief together and continue living in harmony. While there were things to do like the funeral and administrative procedures, my mind was distracted. But once everything was over, I suddenly became lonely. My own parents had already passed away due to cancer. I have a brother, but he lives in the countryside far away with his family. Even if I wanted to talk to my old friends from my student days, it's difficult because they are all in the midst of raising children. Then, a man claiming to be a lawyer called me. Judging from his voice, he was probably in his 70s, around the same age as my mother-in-law. He apologized for being late to notice my mother-in-law's death and said that there was something he wanted to give me as soon as possible. Is it a letter from my mother-in-law? I had never heard that my mother-in-law had been in contact with a lawyer, and I didn't understand the meaning of receiving a letter from a deceased person. I thought it might be a scam, but I decided to meet the lawyer in case the letter was really from my mother-in-law. The letter continued, "I know you're surprised by this sudden letter from me, but please listen. There is danger approaching you. Believe my words and run away immediately." Reading up to here, I asked the lawyer sitting in front of me, "Excuse me, do you know the content of this letter? Was my mother-in-law targeted by someone?" Indeed, the handwriting was my mother-in-law's. It was characterized by her unique quirks, and I recognized it instantly, but I couldn't make sense of the content. The turn of events is so dramatic it can only be likened to a poorly crafted prank. My mother-in-law passed away in a car accident, but the driver has already been apprehended. The driver testified that he found my mother-in-law lying in the road, and that's why the discovery was late. My mother-in-law had signs of being hit, suggesting she might have lost consciousness from it, I was told. If this letter is true, my mother-in-law must have had a suspicion of who had attacked her. Did she know she would get tangled in this incident? If so, why didn't she run away? I felt the tears welling up again. The lawyer, composed as ever, said, "I haven't read the contents, but I believe I could guess what it's about." Somewhat irritated by his roundabout way of speaking, I ventured to ask, "So, what did you hear from my mother-in-law?" "Well, I was the one who represented Oliver at that time and have been asked to help you," he responded. "Who's Oliver?" According to the lawyer, my husband apparently has a brother 6 years older than him. I had never heard a word about this from either my mother-in-law or my husband, nor had I ever seen any photos. The lawyer started pulling out files that looked like documents from a bag by the side of the table. "Sharon, "Do you know that half of the serious crimes in our country happen within families?" he said, a hint of irony in his voice. "Tragically, the place where we should feel safe and the most content, the family home, is where these heartbreaking incidents of a family member taking another family member's life occur." And with that, he showed me an old photo featuring 4 people: a young man and woman who looked like parents, a boy, and a baby. The young woman looked familiar. It was my mother-in-law. I thought the young man was a stranger at first, but he resembled my husband. The boy also bore a resemblance to the young man, undeniably appearing as father and son. It looked like it could have been taken during a trip to the beach. They were posing in front of a large ship at the port, all with happy smiles on their faces. "The boy with the float, that's Oliver," the lawyer told me. Upon being told, I stared at the boy, my husband's brother, who I knew nothing of. The photo looked so happy, and I couldn't help but feel a pain in my chest, wondering what could have possibly happened. Does being a lawyer mean Oliver caused some incident? Was he the one who assaulted my mother-in-law this time? It must have been like more than 17 or 18 years ago, considering my husband and I were dating 15 years prior to our marriage. Otherwise, it would be strange for me to have known nothing about this. Yes, Oliver became a recluse from the summer of his first year in junior high due to bullying, and 7 years later he caused an incident, he explained. It seems Oliver, in despair about his future after becoming a recluse, attempted to commit family suicide. Late at night, on the day of the incident, he went into his parents' room with a knife and ended up struggling with his father, who woke up due to the noise. Even while severely injured, his father was able to subdue Oliver, and the incident ended in an attempted crime. However, upon hearing his mother scream during the struggle between his father and Oliver, my husband, who was 14 at the time, called the police. Police cars and ambulances rushed to the scene, causing a brief stir in the usually quiet residential area. At the time, societal issues such as hermits and NEETs were becoming common, and the media would sensationally report on stories like "a reclusive boy planning a murder-suicide with his family." I remember hearing news like this, but I had no idea if it was referring to the husband's family or not. After all, similar stories were often reported in the media. However, it was different for those involved. The husband's family, unable to withstand the rumors, ended up moving house several times, almost like fleeing in the night. Whether it was due to the severe injuries at the time or the subsequent stress, the father-in-law passed away a few years later. The mother-in-law and the husband changed their names back to the mother-in-law's maiden name, and it was said that they were finally able to lead a normal life in their current place. Both the perpetrator and the victim are family, so there's no outlet for emotions in family incidents. You can't fully hate or detest. Any person would be confused if suddenly put in such a complicated situation. Living under the public eye, rumors, and bashing is very hard. I hope you can empathize with the feelings of the deceased who couldn't talk to you, Sharon, the man summarized. I was at a loss for words due to the harshness of it all. I had never considered what happened to the family after such an incident, but as long as they are alive, life goes on. The in-laws must have seen the boy, Oliver, as their adorable child. The photo of Oliver that I was shown had a smile that greatly resembled my husband's, but the button that was mistakenly buttoned couldn't be fixed, and he ended up facing the worst tragedy. Later, Oliver was sentenced to actual imprisonment and was said to have served time. When the lawyer started explaining at length, "I represented Oliver, remember? The same punishment applies even for an attempt, life imprisonment, or at least 5 to 20 years in prison." I interrupted him by asking, "A minimum of 5 years? Are you saying Oliver could be out already?" "Yes, he was actually released about 2 years ago." According to the lawyer, the prosecutor's office has a victim notification system. After a verdict is confirmed, you can apply to the prosecutor's office to be notified about the planned release date of the offender, or even after they have been released. Even without that, the mother-in-law is Oliver's biological mother. She had been notified of his residence after his release. Around that time, my husband had been diagnosed with cancer and was undergoing treatment, and the mother-in-law didn't want to worry him, so it seems she couldn't consult with him. Oliver told me at the time that he committed the crime because he was pessimistic about his future. With some hesitation, the lawyer told me, it seems he wanted money to spend. Oliver, who had been a shut-in for many years, had started to secretly use the mother-in-law's credit card to pay for online games and online shopping, and he had been scolded by his father. Apparently, he had used a lot of money to buy weapons for a game on the evening of the crime and had his computer taken away. Oliver lied to the lawyer, and his real father, mother, and brother who knew the truth said nothing. While they hoped Oliver would genuinely reflect on his actions and serve his punishment, they did not reveal the inside story of the post-release defamation and slander. Was this out of familial love? Truth be told, my mother-in-law was often visiting Oliver, my brother-in-law, who was serving time in prison. Every time she went, she would come back disappointed by Oliver's unchanging, unrepentant demeanor. She was afraid to live with Oliver again after his release. The danger of violence was part of the fear, but she knew if she or her son were to die, Oliver would come to me asking for money. As his release date approached, there was an increase in tedious paperwork. She had to decide where to house him. Distressed, my mother-in-law decided to consult a lawyer who knew about the case and ask him to handle the procedures. What was Oliver doing for a living 2 years ago? It turned out that through the lawyer, she had been helping Oliver by renting an apartment for him. She would do his shopping. She was giving him money saved in her dresser and her own retirement savings. The inheritance she would receive if her son, in other words, her own child, died. After his release, Oliver became a shut-in again and did not work. Money is limited, and through the lawyer, my mother-in-law conveyed, I can't support you forever. You need to start working on your own. But Oliver flatly refused. Doesn't my mother love me? She's always favoring my brother. She won't give me money because my brother told her not to. He made a big fuss. The lawyer said, although it may have been an accident, the deceased was worried that Oliver might cause some trouble. He kept insisting that I give him money. Oliver became aggressive towards the lawyer as well, and seemed to be asking in detail about my mother-in-law's income and current life of his father and brother. Fortunately, I don't think he knows our address, but I'm worried that his apartment is near where the deceased died. At that moment, I remembered that the bag was not found. Then the doorbell rang. The only expected visitor was the lawyer. Excuse me for a moment. I excused myself and headed to the entrance. I had a bad feeling. When I checked through the peephole, there was a man standing who looked a lot like my husband. I could see the bag that my mother-in-law used to use. Quietly retreated to the living room and called the lawyer. I think, it might be Oliver. What should we do? He has my mother-in-law's bag. My voice was shaking with tension, and the lawyer's face stiffened. Call the police right now. I might have meant to call the police, but I was too upset. I ran out the back door to the nearby police station. Did my mother-in-law and husband foresee this situation in the future? Or did they unconsciously choose a house near the police? I don't know anymore. Afterwards, when Oliver saw the police officers who came with me, he immediately tried to run away and was caught by a police officer who then interviewed him. As I suspected, the man who looked like my husband was Oliver, in other words, my brother-in-law. The lawyer called him Oliver, which was probably his name at the time, and I had been calling him Oliver because I had seen a family photo from when he was a small boy with a hint of innocence. But in reality, he was an unhealthy-looking middle-aged man. It strangely angered me that he looked like my husband. This man had been tormenting my mother-in-law and husband. I'm just here to collect my share, your mom's inheritance. It exists, right? Even my younger brother died last year. Hand over my inheritance. Ignoring the police officer's questions, my brother-in-law Oliver yelled at me. What nerve does he have? I was furious. I sympathize with his childhood, being teased to the point of not going to school, but his actions thereafter were selfish and unforgivable. More than anything, what I wanted to ask was, isn't that your mother's bag you're holding? What did you do to her? Did you lay hands on a frail woman? Upon hearing my words, the officers also looked at the bag that Oliver was holding. In a fluster, Oliver tried to hide it, but it was too late. As one officer reached out his hand, Oliver snarled at him. "Hey, this is my money. I can't help it." It was the last thing my mom said. I only hit her a few times to teach her a lesson for being cheeky. Oliver's thought process made me shudder. There was no sense in his words, and he showed no remorse. Moreover, "Hey, you are my brother's wife, aren't you? Neither my mom nor my brother are here anymore. You have an obligation to support me." Maybe my mother-in-law and husband hid Oliver's existence from me, fearing this situation. They must have thought that if I didn't know, I could avoid getting involved. No. "Mrs. Sharon, you don't have that obligation." The lawyer interrupted, but I doubted that the law would work on Oliver. Oliver was ultimately an invincible man with nothing to lose. He doesn't understand common sense, nor does he seem to want to abide by the law. Maybe that's why my mother-in-law never wanted me to meet him. I can only imagine how difficult her life must have been. I haven't finished reading it all, but my mother-in-law left me a letter worrying about me, knowing her life was in danger. Her pain and sadness are heartbreaking. Because of you, my mother-in-law and husband were hurt so much. I will never forgive you. You will face the law. Indeed, the direct cause was being hit by a car. However, he left my unconscious mother-in-law on the road. He is not a person who should be left to roam the streets. I pledged to myself that I would do whatever it takes to send him back to prison. Watching me, the lawyer stood beside me and said, "I'll help you." Oliver was taken to the police station. The blood on my mother-in-law's bag and circumstantial evidence pointed to Oliver as the culprit, and he was sent back to prison again. I returned home with the lawyer and read my mother-in-law's letter to the end. Her letter was filled with apologies to me and overflowing love, especially the end. "Life is still long. Please live a happier, freer life, Sharon." Upon seeing that, I couldn't stop my tears.
5 years ago, my sister-in-law, Isabella, who stole $100,000 from our family home, showed up out of nowhere. "I'm moving back in with my husband and in-law, so you'll need to leave." "Excuse me? There's no family home left, you know." Isabella seemed confused. "Huh?" So here's the backstory. I'm Rachel, just turned 30. 6 years ago, I met Owen at work, and we got married and I left my job. Owen and I decided to live in the guest house on my parents' property. The guest house is spacious and it's close to Owen's workplace, so he was totally fine with the idea. I have a younger brother named Joshua. In high school, he even played in the state championship for American football, but never turned pro. Or rather, couldn't. But he was pretty popular locally and among the ladies, so he got married to Isabella a year before I did, and they also lived on the family property. Isabella was stunning. She could have easily been a model. Joshua fell head over heels for her. However, after marrying Joshua, Isabella showed her true colors and was always arguing with him. And then 5 years ago, she took off with $100,000 that was stashed in Dad's room. Even though it was a full-blown crime, Dad didn't want to make a big deal, so he didn't report it to the police. Joshua was desperately searching for Isabella, but never found her. About 3 years after Isabella disappeared, Dad suddenly passed away due to an infectious disease. Then, just 2 weeks later, Mom also died from the same disease. Losing both parents so quickly, I couldn't easily accept the reality. Neither could Joshua, and we were both in a state of shock. It took us about a month to come to terms with our parents being gone. "Joshua, it's just the two of us now. Why didn't you take over the house?" He didn't respond. After a while, he finally said, "Rachel, I'm thinking of leaving this place." And that took me by surprise. "Wait, why is that?" "Well, my high school buddy owns a hotel by the sea, and has been asking me to help him out for a while, so I'm thinking of working there. If that's what you want, Joshua, I won't object. A few days later, Joshua moved to the seaside town. After he left, I felt lonely looking at our empty family home where both my parents and Joshua used to live. Owen noticed and said, "Rachel, you look lonely." Hearing that from Owen, I broke down crying and he gently hugged me. After a moment, Owen suggested, "How about we rent an apartment somewhere and move?" I was glad Owen offered that. "Yes, let's. This place feels too big and lonely." "So what do we do with this house? We can't leave it empty. Rent it or sell it?" "Let's sell it, but I'll inform Joshua first." "All right, I'll get the process started." "Thank you." I tried calling Joshua's cell to tell him about selling our family home, but his phone was off. I called the hotel he was supposed to be working at, and a friend told me he had suddenly canceled and had been unreachable ever since. Unable to contact Joshua, I was unsure what to do. In the end, I told Owen to proceed with selling the house. Owen contracted a real estate agent he knew. And to our surprise, the house sold quickly and for a great price, leaving both Joshua and me with a hefty inheritance. I wanted to tell Joshua, but I couldn't get in touch with him. 2 years passed. One day, Owen came home with a serious look on his face. A colleague at work said he saw Isabella. This colleague had attended our wedding, where he'd seen Isabella. She had been a standout beauty at the wedding, leaving a lasting impression. Where did he see her? After seeing a movie with his wife, they went to a nearby coffee shop. She was there drinking coffee alone. What was she doing? Looked like she was waiting for someone. So she had an appointment with someone then. Seems like it. But why appear now? I wonder where she's been all this time. What happened to the money she took? It's probably all gone. Should we tell Joshua about this? I think it's better we don't. It would be cruel to bring up old memories, especially when he's finally moved on. So we decided not to tell Joshua about Isabella. It's not like anything would change for Joshua if Isabella came back now, but Isabella's story didn't end there. A week after my coworker spotted Isabella, I got a surprising call from her. I didn't recognize the number on my phone, so I answered, wondering who it could be. "Long time no talk, Rachel. How have you been?" Her voice was upbeat, but to me, it seemed careless. I couldn't identify who it was. Who is this? "Forgot my voice already? It's me, Isabella." I was so shocked that, for a moment, I couldn't find the words to respond. Finally, I spoke, my voice icy. "What are you doing now?" "Rachel, are you mad? Well, I guess that's understandable." Isabel chuckled on the other end of the line. "Where are you right now?" "I'm in a coffee shop near the cinema, where Owen's coworker saw me." Isabella knew she had been seen. "Why didn't you contact me sooner then?" "Well, there were some complications. By the way, Rachel, can you come over here?" "Right now?" "Yes." I had no other plans, so I decided to go. "Fine, I'm coming." I quickly got ready and headed to the coffee shop where Isabella was waiting. I arrived about 30 minutes later and reunited with Isabella for the first time in 5 years. She looked as stunning as ever, even more so than before, drawing admiring glances from men around her. Once I sat down and ordered coffee, Isabella spoke bluntly. "I'm moving back in with Joshua and our parents-in-law, so you better move out." "What? There's no home left, Upon hearing this, Isabella widened her eyes. "Huh? My parents are gone. They passed away from an infectious disease 2 years ago. That's why I sold the house." Isabella clicked her tongue softly. "You've got to be kidding. So you showed up because you were after the house, huh? How dare you? You stole money from my family and then disappeared. Don't think I'll let you forget that." Hearing my words, Isabella retorted. "That's not true. It was Joshua who told me to steal the money. Don't make it sound like it was only my fault." I couldn't understand what Isabella was getting at. "I don't understand what you're talking about." Then Isabella raised her voice. "That's what I'm saying. Joshua told me to steal the money and then he said to hide it somewhere and wait." I was dumbstruck upon hearing this, and I just couldn't believe what Isabella had said. I can't believe you, Do you have any proof? I do. Take a look at this. Isabella pulled a piece of paper from her bag and handed it to me. It was a bank transfer statement. The sender was Isabella, and the receiver was listed as Joshua. The amount matched what Isabella had taken off with 5 years ago. I was shaking with disbelief at the turn of events. So you believe me now, right? I mustered up the courage to speak. So you and Joshua planned to steal my parents' money from the beginning. Exactly. Joshua recently said he's bored living in the countryside and wants to return to his family home. So where's Joshua now? He's been living with me in an apartment nearby since last month. What happened to the stolen money? Isabella made a sly face and said, We spent it all, but it's Joshua's fault. He got hooked on gambling and it disappeared in no time. Hearing that they had squandered the money my parents worked so hard to save, I burst into tears. Isabella looked at me curiously. Why are you crying, Rachel? It's not like we stole your money. She paused, then looked as though she'd had an epiphany. I get it. You're crying because the inheritance you were supposed to get was used by Joshua. My heart sank further at Isabella's words. No, I'm crying because what you did to my parents is so unfair. Isabella looked flabbergasted. What are you talking about? What's wrong with using parents' money? They earn it for their children after all. My parents didn't work their butts off so you and Joshua could blow their savings on gambling. I don't get what you're saying. It's all the same if the child ends up using the parents' money. You don't have to get it. Actually, you'll never get it. As I said that, Isabella changed her tone and yelled, Don't be rude. What about your brother? He's not working, just fooling around. Her words broke me, and I started crying uncontrollably. Then Isabella picked up her mobile phone and made a call. Joshua, can you come here now? Your sister is saying some really strange stuff. Isabella told Joshua to come here, but from what I gathered, Joshua seemed to have declined. Fine, never mind, I'll tell her that. And by the way, your sister is mad. Isabella hung up. Joshua says he won't come here. Seems like he doesn't want to see you. That makes sense. He's been lying to me all this time. If I see Joshua again, who knows what I'll do. Wow, scary, scary. Tell me where Joshua is now. Fine, I'll tell you, considering I've lost my family home and I'm fine with leaving Joshua now. I felt sorry for Joshua being misled by such a heartless and frivolous woman, but still couldn't forgive him for squandering my parents' hard-earned money. The next day I went with Owen to the place where Isabella said Joshua was staying. It was a cheap apartment with shared kitchens and bathrooms. I knocked on the shaky wooden door. I heard a TV playing inside, but no one answered. Owen knocked harder. The TV went silent, as if someone inside was holding their breath. Owen pushed open the door with ease, revealing Joshua inside with untamed hair and a scruffy beard. Shockingly, Isabella was also there, lying on a grimy bed. Joshua, long time no see. What are you doing here? As you can see, nothing much. I thought you were working at a friend's hotel. Yeah, that might have happened. Is it true that you gambled away the family money? Upon hearing this, Joshua suddenly turned to Isabella and yelled, What the hell did you say? I only told the truth. So what did you say? That you love gambling. Joshua's face turned beet red with anger. So it sounds like I'm the only one who used the money? Pretty much. Don't lie. You also bought tons of jewelry and designer bags. Joshua grabbed a nearby beer bottle and moved toward Isabella on the bed. Feeling threatened, Isabella quickly stood up and hid behind us. Hey, come over here. Owen snatched the beer bottle from Joshua's hand. Calm down. That's not acceptable. And what are you saying, ignoring your own faults? What did you say? Isabella, please be quiet. You're just provoking Joshua. Listen to me too. What? I found out later that Isabella stole money. I told her to return it and she transferred it to my account. But then she used my credit card number to buy famous brands of bags and perfume, spending about $50,000. That's awful. Exactly. That's why I was working at my best friend's hotel trying to save up and repay it. But Isabella said that with my hotel salary, it would take decades to repay it all. Joshua started to cry and couldn't finish his sentence. I walked over to Joshua and comforted him by patting his back. I understand. Joshua said, his voice shaky with tears. I'm sorry, Rachel. Isabella told me that gambling would be an easy way to make money. I got carried away and ended up using all the money. Tears streamed down Joshua's face as he spoke next to me. However, Isabella looked at him with disdain. What are you talking about? You're just acting too. I'm not lying. I know it's also my fault for letting myself be swayed by what Isabella said. I believe you, Joshua. Do you have any proof that I stole the money all by myself? If so, show it. Joshua looked frustrated, but then his face lit up. Actually, I might have some evidence. No way you do. Rachel, I think my old phone has text messages from Isabella saying she took $100,000 from Dad's room, and it should have the messages where she said I should just gamble to make money. Hearing this, Isabella's tone changed. I only mentioned gambling as a hypothetical. I never thought you'd actually do it. But it still serves as evidence that you took the money without consulting anyone. Joshua, where's your old phone? Joshua looked distressed. I don't know where it is because it's an old phone. Where is your stuff then? I had planned to work at a friend's hotel, so I sent my stuff to their place, but I canceled without telling them, so they might have thrown it all away. Isabella's face showed relief. Joshua, call that friend and ask if they still have your things. I broke a promise with my best friend, so I'm hesitant, but I'll give it a try. Joshua left to make the call in the corridor, because the reception was poor inside the apartment. But after a while, Joshua returned. Looks like we're good. They kept all my stuff. I asked them to charge the old phone and forward the messages from Isabella. Isabella stood up abruptly and shouted, sobbing, I'm leaving. I'm never coming back here. You're staying right here until the messages arrive. Owen quickly moved in front of the door to block her exit. About 30 minutes later, Joshua's phone buzzed. It was a message from his friend. Joshua showed me and Owen the message, which clearly indicated that Isabella had stolen the money. When I looked at Isabella, she was burying her face in the bed and crying. It's all out now. With this evidence, I plan to report you to the police. Isabella cried out, Please forgive me, I'll work and I'll pay it all back. You took big game, but I bet you'll just run away when the going gets tough. That's not true, I swear. Sorry, but I know you better than anyone. You can't resist buying things you want. I won't buy anything anymore, I promise. Do you really mean that? I promise. Sitting like that, are you actually sorry? Isabella was lounging on the bed, legs thrown carelessly to the side. Realizing her posture, Isabella quickly sat upright, but I continued. If you're genuinely sorry, then show it. Finally getting it, Isabella straightened up, placing her hands on her lap. I am truly sorry. I will pay back every penny, no matter what. All right. Write that down, and at the bottom put that if you don't pay back the full amount, I have the right to go to the police. Shaking visibly, Isabella nonetheless took the paper I handed her and wrote down what I'd said, signing it. Rachel, you really trust her? She'll betray us. Right now, even if we get her arrested, we won't get the money back. She'll work it off and repay us, or else she'll answer to our parents in heaven. Okay, fine, you're right. And Joshua, don't forget you also need to repay the money you spent gambling. I know. I'll work at my buddy's place. A month went by. Isabella tried to find work but was unsuccessful in the end. She ended up working as a hotel maid at a hotel owned by one of Joshua's friends. I felt relieved knowing Joshua was keeping an eye on her, so there was no worry she'd run off. 2 months passed since they started their jobs at the hotel. Joshua was a jack of all trades at the hotel and seemed to be doing well. Isabella, however, was struggling. She constantly mentioned wanting to quit, according to Joshua. Each time she did, Joshua would remind her, Would you rather work here or go to prison? Another 3 months went by. Owen and I decided to take an overnight trip and secretly visited the hotel where Joshua and Isabella were working. Shortly after we were escorted to our room, a noticeably thin hotel maid brought in the amenities. As she noticed us, she gasped, dropping the amenities. It's been a while. I'll bring new amenities right away. I've been working hard. I recognized the voice and realized the thin maid was Isabella. She had lost so much weight, her features had changed completely, and she looked like she could collapse at any moment. After Isabella left, Joshua came into our room. Rachel, if you're coming, you could have told me. Isabella got startled and dropped the amenities. Isabella looked entirely different. I couldn't even recognize her. Every night she goes to bed crying, saying how hard it is, but she has to keep working until she pays back all the money. I guess I have to repay the money I lost gambling. Joshua said, his face etched with sadness.